Awesome. So what we're going to be doing, Chris is going to be sending me a coaching guide and handouts. And then, so after the program, I'll make sure it gets distributed to everybody who signed up for this. All right. So let me introduce Ben, and then I'll introduce Chris. Ben Murphy is Vice President at Titus Talent Strategies. He loves sports. He's a former football player and coach. You're braver than I am, Ben. He brings a lot of what he learned on the field to lead our sales team at Titus Talent. His passion is leading people and working with others to achieve their goals. Faith, family, and friends are a priority for him, as well as helping others. He takes great pride in serving their partners, and sitting in on their side of the table to make sure everything works well. So Ben says that if he had a superpower of flight, he would never fly away from Titus. He knows he couldn't accomplish anything without the entire Titus team and their shared vision, mission, and values. Now, as for Chris is a senior director at Titus Talent. He grew up as a competitive wrestler. Boy, you guys are tough.
Got a sports group tonight.
And brings this passion and drive and work ethic to the marketplace. He's a dependable colleague with a wide variety of interests, from spending time with family and reading to CrossFit and enjoying good bourbon. Well, I'll have to ask you about that after, Chris. He has 10 years of experience consulting people and growing teams. He loves serving the partners Titus has with empathy and providing different perspectives and so forth. So without further ado, Chris and Ben, take it away.
All right. Thank you, David. And it's good to see a lot of familiar faces here at just some of the ATD events over the last few months, even before the pandemic. So it'll be good to see you guys in person over the next few weeks. So as David mentioned, Ben and I are here. I want to give a little bit about who we are. First of all, like you said, Ben comes from a literal coaching background as a coach, and it brings that philosophy into business and business development over the last 15 years. I came from a life coaching and business coaching background. So I was ICF certified and went through a group called CTI and did my own coaching and consulting practice. And I love the development of people, and I love trying to figure out, where someone is to where they could be, and helping them get out of their own way, whether it's from a business perspective or personal perspective. So that's really what fuels me. And when we found Titus, I've been at Titus, I think 7 years, maybe Ben 8 to 10. And when we found Titus, we recognized that Titus was a different company altogether. So Titus has been around 13 years, and it really has been a response to an ache in the marketplace. A lot of businesses saying, we feel like that, talent strategy, which is, in our words, the recruitment and retention of candidates and people. They felt it was a little bit broken. And so out of that ache and pain, Titus Talent was born. And so we have a big goal to be, companies, a one-stop shop for helping companies find people and keep people. Today, we're talking about coaching, which is more on the keep people and the management and driving performance. And that's the topic of today's talk, is really, how do you drive performance? It's the art and science. So we're going to get into some data. We're going to get into some art as well on what that looks like. But I recognize everybody in the room is an expert. And so we don't come at this as a top down. We're here to teach. We're really, we want to illuminate what many of you already know, and hopefully you'll walk away with some tools as well. We're going to give you everything. So the deck, and then a few coaching guides that we use, hopefully will be instrumental as we move forward. And so I'm going to share my screen, and then we can get into this. And then, so how it's going to work is pretty much many like other presentations. Ben and I, we're going to tag team and probably talk over each other a bit or two. And because we're both passionate about this, we want to leave room probably at the end. But if you guys have just a burning question, raise your hand. I think I saw someone with a hand. I don't know if that was a clap. I don't know how Zoom does, but I think, Jenna, that was you. And so, use the tools. And but we do want to leave some room at the end for questions. And in this talk, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as I pull this up.
Let me just say that we'll be checking the chat if you put a question in the chat. And also, it may be easiest if you just sort of raise your actual hand. So, which is probably bigger than the thing that Zoom provides. So however you want to do it, but either way, we'll get your attention and we'll ask the question.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm going to do advanced share because I know there's going to be a portion where we're going to optimize video because there's going to be a video piece to this as well. So this, okay, you guys see my screen, right?
Yep.
All right.
Awesome.
Yep. Okay, good, because I can't see you now, but at least you can see our screen. This presentation really came out of it's part of a bigger framework that we have called Manage for Performance. And so, like I said, we do both the hiring and then the engagement and retention for companies. Very, very passionate about that. And so we're going to go deep into some of our philosophies on how to really engage and drive top performing people at your company. But it really came from this statistic that we read, is that 90, and some of you may recognize this as true. 90% of CEOs often don't care about engagement data. What they care most about is performance, profit, bottom line. So what we're doing here in this conversation is we're starting with performance, but everybody in the room, we all know that engagement drives performance. It's your people that helps you hit your performance goals, right? So we're going to talk about performance. We're also going to talk about engagement. But this is good data that then you can take back to your executive teams, or maybe you're coaching as well. Maybe you're not in a company, maybe you are the company that's coaching companies, but you can take this back to them and recognize that this is actually going to help them drive the bottom line in that specific pursuit. So a few things that we're going to cover that you will kind of hear throughout the talk here. These are going to be seated in this, but a people first culture and a high performing culture, sometimes people would say those are oil and water, right? Where it's like, you've got a high performing, but if the people first is not there. So what we posit is that we think you can have a people first culture and a high performing culture. And we're going to get into that because we think it's all about visibility, accountability. But these 8 things are going to be seeded throughout our talk, and really creating a way for your manager and your employee to win together. So we're going to talk about that. And then also what we would say is more important than the golden rule. So the golden rule, we all know, is treat others the way that you want to be treated, right? Well, the platinum rule says treat others the way that they want to be treated. So it's this understanding of okay, there's empathy here. I understand now how you want to be treated, how you want to be coached. And so I'm going to adjust to you. Then creating a people first culture of coaching is really elevating peer and self-awareness. So, we are big proponents of any kind of tools that help you create awareness of who you are and the context that you're in. And then also reverse engineering success and failure. And so that way, okay, this is what it takes to get there, but what are those metrics? And how can it be objective enough that everybody can really win? Everybody can achieve that. It's not some special personality or gifting. It really can be achievable for all. And then in that, creating a progress, coaching for progress, coaching for, that one book that many of you I'm sure have read, Atomic Habits. How do you make yourself 1% better, right? That up and to the right progress is going to fuel engagement really, really big time. And then also creating a people first culture is, it's not avoiding the difficult conversations. I think I wrote that weird. That's not people first, is when you avoid those difficult conversations, but it's hard to have the difficult conversations when you don't have the data to back it up. So we're going to talk about how do you have a transparent scorecard for that. And then as people master their current role, then they're able to say, okay, what's my future career pathing? What's my talent map here at this company? Again, creating that those top performers are always, as you know, leaning in. They're asking what's next. They're asking, hey, how can I crush my next role, right? They're thinking about that. And then what are rhythms for attention? So it's not a one size fits all. Everybody doesn't need nor want the same type of attention. So on a coaching level, how do you know how to be attuned and attentive to the different people in your organization? So That's why we're introducing the Coaching for Performance. It truly is a systematic approach to developing your people to success in their seats. So there's a few things we're going to be talking about in that, but one thing I remember, we were talking at there was a big conference, an EOS conference. So that's a operating system, entrepreneurial operating system. And so we were one of the keynote speakers. And at the breakout session, we had, I think it was 372, I think it was, Ben, you could remind me, 370 some odd CEOs and COOs came to our breakout session in the standing room only. And the thing that they really wanted to know is they said, okay, how do we motivate and hold accountable our top performers? How do we optimize our people strategy? And not only are we struggling in the hiring piece, but we're also struggling in the retention and engagement and coaching piece. They didn't really have a methodology that really worked. The one size fit all wasn't working for them. So we're going to dig into that. And part of our take on it is there has to be clear visibility on performance. And so when we hire people in, we want to really make sure that they know what they're being asked to do, right? So it's kind of basic in that way. We're going to also talk about a holistic view of coaching your employees through, our term is the head, heart, and briefcase. We'll dig into that in a minute, but that's a way to say there's a whole person on the other side of the conversation. They're not just their experience. They're not just what they can do for you, right? They're a whole mix of our personal and professional, and our personal affects our professional, and what motivates us, what are our dreams and aspirations and pains and all of those things. How does that come into the workplace, and how do we help get through those things so we can really drive performance? So we're going to talk about that. The other one is really when you identify top performers for succession planning, this is really key to keeping top performers engaged. The data shows is that 53% of top performers will leave if there's not a clear next step for them, if there's not a roadmap for them at their current job. So, those headhunters, right, that are giving them a call, half of them are going to take that phone call if they can't see themselves, at your organization. So that's really key to really not only engaging them, but helping them perform. And then driving engagement through job alignment and manager fit. So the two reasons we see that top performers also leave is not only the lack of career planning, but if there's not a job alignment, there's not a manager alignment as well. If they don't feel like their manager really understands who they are, how to coach them, how to really understand how to let them, do what they do, or how to really provide some very, very timely feedback, engagement goes down. So these are things that I know that you guys know, but we are seeing in our work with companies. Okay, so mindset shifts. So along with anything, when we're adopting something new, especially with, I would say, hiring managers, again, this is the stuff that we do. This is the stuff that you do. So the mindset may already be there for you, but it's good to know this is something that we can take and try to coach our hiring managers into. But I like to think of them as a from to imperative, where you're going from one mindset to another. So first of all is from a kind of a micromanaging mindset, right? Where managers feel like they have to micromanage, or else they're not going to get the productivity, they're not going to get the performance, into an empowerment mindset. When you empower someone, you're really lifting them up. You're understanding what they need, you're understanding their gifts, skills, and abilities, and you're elevating them, right? But it takes thought, it takes data, it takes tools to really understand that. So we're going to talk about that. And then accountability through transparency. We are big believers of high accountability, but low control. And the reason we can have low control is because of the metrics that we set and the transparency around that. So we'll dig into that as well. And then rhythms of attention. Again, some people want higher levels of engagement. Some people want less, not as frequent levels of engagement. But how do we know that? And how do we understand what's going to drive the performance of that specific person? Another mindset shift is from training on everything to coaching to the core fundamentals. So this is where, you might bring in, a speaker or a trainer on one topic, but everybody's in the room, right? And that's fine, but it's kind of like everybody doesn't really need or absorb the same amount of information, or it's relevant perhaps to their job or to their stage within their specific job. So what are the core fundamentals then? that would actually help them in their specific job doing what they specifically do reach high performance. That's kind of a mindset shift. And then a one-size-fits-all training to customized coaching. Again, going back to that customization, especially with your new hires and recognizing that they have specific needs, wants, and desires. And how do you fit a kind of a training that's also sustainable and scalable to everyone in your organization? So we're going to dig into that here. Ben, why don't you jump in and take this one? And because this one's actually talking about the engagement and performance together and how they correlate.
Yeah, and so as you look at the goal, right, you're trying to develop an organization, develop a culture. You need to know where your people sit in the spectrum. Well, the spectrum that we're looking at is we're trying to drive people into that top right quadrant. So we want committed champions. We want people that are highly performing, highly engaged, aligned with the organization. And so, one, we need to know where people are. Two, we need to have an individual game plan for each person in their role to help drive them to that top right quadrant. What we want to avoid are these other quadrants, okay? We work in business all the time, and honestly, they kind of chuckle a little bit when I say, do you have any silent killers? People that have been with you for a while, everyone probably loves them, they've been engaged with the business, but you know that they're underperforming, or you believe they're underperforming. And they all laugh and said, yeah, we have a few of those people. And I said, well, why do you let them just sit there and underperform, right? What's the game plan to coach them up? And how would you get them to the committed champion box? On the flip side, you have the lone wolves. Those are people that are highly performing. They're hitting what's expected of them, but you have engagement issues. You could have team dynamic issues, you could have value alignment issues. And so what's the game plan to work with them, coach with them, to get them into that top right quadrant? And then the worst case scenario is the contaminators. You have low performance, low engagement. You have some big issues. You're typically getting about 66% of what you expect out of performance when you have someone that would fall in that contaminator box. And so they're really costing you on the bottom line. They're also could be costing you on a culture perspective. And so we use these as a simple way to frame our goal and try to understand where our people fall in their journey with us as an organization.
That's right. Thanks, Ben. Part of the 4-step process, once we understand where people sit in the organization. So, we take this, and again, all of our people, there's going to be a scatter plot, right? They're going to land in probably all 4 of these buckets. But once we recognize where people land, then we can create a game plan. And our 4-step process starts with quantifying what we call the accountability chart. So we're big believers that every seat in the organization ought to have an accountability chart, meaning that there ought to have at least 3 to 5 objectives that are measurable, that are SMART, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, that are quantifiable on what they are supposed to do. So let me dig into that real quick here in a moment. Next, we would then say, okay, we want you to hoist the scoreboard. So once we understand what they're held accountable to, then we want to raise and elevate a transparency among their colleagues, both in the specific role in the organization as well, on what they're required to do to achieve, to continue to grow and hit those metrics. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then from that, then you can create a culture of consistent coaching. So now that you have illuminated, now that you've measured, now you've illuminated, now you've got a game plan and a roadmap to have an objective, consistent coaching around not only performance objectives, but we're going to talk about skills, values, and behaviors on what those look like to have a consistent coaching culture around those 3 things. And then maximizing, we actually have quarterly conversations, and we're a big believer of that. Gallup came up with a poll. You guys probably saw this, but they said that the 1-year annual review just isn't going to cut it anymore. You don't know where your people are. People are we just change so often that at least having a quarterly conversation is what's going to really help you keep a good pulse on your people. So having those quarterly conversations, what you talk about, that's going to be what we're the kind of the 4-step process and how you creating this high performing culture. So back to the first one on creating a benchmark. So everybody obviously works with job descriptions. We think we don't like job descriptions. We think, again, this is even post-hire, we recommend replacing a job description or at least complementing it with what we call a performance profile. So this is where you're creating 3 to 5 performance quantifiable objectives that are performance relatable, that you can hold them accountable to, right? That they're going to need to do within their job. And these are, so we want you to think, instead of what they have, we want you to think about accomplishing, what they're going to need to accomplish, what they're going to need to do. And so again, you guys, maybe we need to work with HR, your HR manager, to really help massage some of this or complement and saying, hey, we'd like to create a profile that talks about a top performer, not just necessarily the skills, because it's really what people do with their skills that matter. It doesn't really matter that someone has 5 or 10 years experience and has this certain degree. To some, it matters in some ways for certifications, but you can't define performance from that. There is no correlation that having years experience, having this specific degree, or having any kind of GPA or coming from a specific school, there's absolutely no data. The data says is that it's actually how someone is wired and what they do with what they have. So what we're really preaching here is creating a profile that says, okay, here's the benchmark, here's the seat that they sit in, here's 3 to 5 metrics that says this is a top, what you're going to get to do, achieve, and accomplish within 1 year. 1 year, because give it a time frame. That way they know, hey, this is how they are based upon the timeline that they're in the seat. Okay, here are some specific examples, and Ben and I will send this out so you guys can have this. It just gives you ideas of what performance objectives, or maybe KPIs is another way to say it, on how do you really drill into specific, either role specific. Some of these are also industry specific, but within sales, for example, right? You're gonna really find, okay, a top selling professional on your team gonna have a certain number of proposals sent, a certain number of outbound calls, perhaps. Maybe someone in supply chain logistics, one of their metrics is going to be how accurate are their orders, right? What's their accuracy for their freight rate, right? So there's different things that you can really drill into, but just 3 to 5. We often find if a company is creating more than 5, then often the role is probably too big, and you might need to divide the role, okay, into 2 roles. Okay, so that was quantifying.
Chris, I want to add here just something I think super important. When you start to create, right, we're creating a culture of performance. Well, it's a mindset of how people are thinking. When you're thinking, all right, what do I need this person to accomplish? Why am I hiring them? Right. And you're the leader and you start to think that way, then you can transcend that and cascade that down to your next level. So you're creating future leaders in your business where people are focused on accomplishing things and the values of things and how they're going to win for what they need to win with in the business, and avoiding just doing random tasks, random to-do list, right? All things should be done that are leading towards those key objectives. And you can always check your thought process against that as you're working with them and you're setting the framework for what you're trying to win as an organization.
Great. Yeah, it really becomes a guide that you can coach off of. And so the next step in, once you've created that clear accountability chart for that specific role, then what we recommend you hoist the scoreboard. And that's kind of a funny term, but it comes from, obviously, coming from a coaching background. I was a wrestler. Ben was a football player, and how we performed on the game or on the mat, it actually influenced how we practiced throughout the week. And so that scoreboard on performance day, right? That scoreboard of when and how we got those points and how we didn't, that actually translated into a coaching methodology on Monday through Friday. So, Monday through Friday would not have meant much. It would have felt very aimless to just say, I'm just going to practice at everything. I'm just going to try to get better at something, when it wasn't specific. So hoisting the scoreboard really helps. And when we talk about a scoreboard, we're not only talking about performance we're going to get into how we're talking also about skills, values, and behaviors. So within a specific role, yes, there are performance goals, but there are also skills, values, and behaviors that you can really coach off of. And so once you have this, both from a individual standpoint and a team standpoint, it changes the outcome of the conversations. So that's hoisting the scoreboard. And so we had this question. It's funny. One of our clients or executives asked us, he said, how can I give anyone constructive feedback if I don't know how they're doing related to their goals and objectives? He was really struggling with this. So it's part of what you're seeing today, this manage for performance, this coaching for high performers, came out of that angst of really saying, listen, we need some objective goals and feedback so we can really help them beyond just what they're held accountable to from a productivity standpoint, but from a person standpoint, from a motivation, from a heart value standpoint. How can we help them grow up into the right? So Ben, I'll let you dive into this. What you're going to see here real quick is just some screenshots of how we house this conversation, right? But I want to just say this from the front. All of this can be done on an Excel spreadsheet. It can be done, in a Microsoft Word document. It doesn't have to be fancy with bar charts like you're seeing here, but you'll get the idea of what it looks like to have a scoreboard that everybody really can, and why that matters.
Yeah, what you're looking at here is one of the things. We did this in Excel for years as we were growing our business, but we wanted to understand performance. We want to understand not only the people performance, but we wanted to see it from a department perspective as well, because we knew there was going to be a strong correlation with our ability to grow and be profitable and have high performance if we had highly functioning teams and then highly functioning individuals on those teams. And so we put it to the scoreboard so we know where we should be spending our focus time. And we can have organized, not wasting time on random conversations, but really getting into the meat and potatoes where we have opportunities to get better. And so we'll show you this a little bit later, but that just is illuminating the scoreboard picture that we try to look at. We also do that at the individual levels. We talked about identifying top performers, making sure we have plans with them. We want to make sure we know how people are doing and they know how they're doing in relation to that performance. And so they can reach for the stars, crush their numbers, etc. And we want to be able to see if we sometimes have too difficult of goals, or maybe we have too easy of goals, right? So we can set realistic goals for our people over time based on historical data. And so you have to track that and see trend reports so you can make the best decisions as an organization as you move forward.
Okay. All right. Well, so that was, and we'll dig into that actually. I'm going to hand the baton over to Ben here in a minute, where he'll go in and what we'll do is we'll do kind of a mock coaching session, so to speak, on what it looks like to coach a top performer, and really dig into some of these things here. But when you create a culture of consistent coaching, it's beyond the performance, but because behaviors drive performance, doesn't it? Right. And so what we really want to understand is the behavior. We want to understand what are the behaviors that make for success. So we're going to give you a guide at the end of this. We're going to email that out to you, or maybe David will email it to you, where we want you to identify skills, values, and behaviors. So within the specific role, take one role, and what are 10 skills that you would say a top performing, engineer, or a top performing salesperson, or a top performing HR director. This is what they need to know, or need to be able to have ready, be able to be skilled at. What are 10 things? Values. What are the company values? We preach a lot about value and core value alignment. So what are the company values? And then how is that specific employee lining up, right? And a scale of 1 to 5, every single one of these things, we give it a 1 to 5 scale, and they actually get to self-evaluate, which is really fun because you get to see what they think, and then there's a coaching moment there. Skills, values, and behaviors. So what type of behaviors do you want to see in that as well? We recommend creating, 8 to 10 behaviors. And that's a guide by which then you can have a real honest conversation. You can hand that to your hiring managers or your just managers in general that are hiring and that are managing, and they get to have like a scorecard, right? To say, okay, this is how I'm going to manage and coach this person on our quarterly conversations. All right, the data, and this is something that you guys know as far as the benefits of coaching. The ICF came out with this study that said 80% of people who receive coaching report increased self-confidence, and over 70% benefit from improved work performance, relationships, and more effective communication skills. 86% of the companies report that they recouped their investment on coaching and more. So obviously, we're talking about something that the money is there, the performance is there. We can prove it, but making sure how do you make sure that is embedded in the organization. So that we believe it's both an art and a science. So there's intuitive things about it. There's very much empathetic understanding your audience, and also recognizing there's some science that you can get. So some of the factors that influence success. We believe in coaching the entire employee, understanding all factors, and we've talked about this, that it's not only the skills, values, and behaviors, but it's also what motivates them. So our big stake in the ground, I guess, is that there's a whole person in front of you, right? And that we would call it the head, heart, and briefcase. So we use, and we're big analytical behavioral assessment kind of geeks, but what we love is the predictive index. And there's a lot of great ones out there. There's the Colby and the Thero B and 360 and all the DISC and MBTI. Those are all really great, but we love the predictive index because of the validation studies, over 500 of them, and just recognizing that it really does provide a snapshot of the employee. Within 7 minutes, they can take this assessment. Many of you guys know about this. And so big believers. So that's how we get a little bit of a benchmark of how they're wired, how they're behaving within 4 different motivating drivers. Then we want to understand from a heart perspective, what's going on in their internal world. And how is that aligned with where they are in their specific seat and the company that they're a part of, right? So how do you get underneath that? How do you coach around that? Make that a safe space to really have those conversations. And in the briefcase, those are the skills, values, not the values, but the skills and the behaviors, right? So what are those skills that they need to work on to continue or to become a top performer? So those are things that we would put into a scorecard. Whoops. Okay. And
Chris, I'd like to
yeah,
add on that.
Yeah.
So we work with organizations and people are complicated, but they want to hire better and then they want to manage and coach better. Well, we say, let's hire for the same things that we're going to then coach and manage our people to. So when you design a role, so the first thing we do with the partners, we design a role based on performance objectives, then the skills, values, and behaviors that are going to matter for that role. They can hire for those same things as indicators of why they think they can do the job. And then they can carry over those things into a focused coaching conversations ongoing for that person in that role. And I think that's really big because this stuff gets too complicated. So you got to keep it as simple as you can. And I personally believe, keep it as simple as you can from hiring to managing your people in specific roles. And so we use that head, heart, briefcase as a mantra of the focused areas in that process.
Good. You just keep going on this one, and I'll jump in here in a few.
So just a couple of things as we're kind of talking about keys to coaching. There's a study, Gallup came out last fall, said, hey, the annual review never going to work anymore. You need to have more consistent communication with your employees. They need to know where they're at. They need to be engaged in their development more frequently. We will wholeheartedly believe that. And so we try to have more I'm getting questions while I'm talking about Wisconsin. So yes, I am from Wisconsin, Jenna. If I sound like it too, I grew up in Green Bay originally. And so we believe a lot in giving real-time feedback, encouraging and constructive. We want to have a frequent one-on-one meeting. So companies we work with, some have a high attention to communication with their employees and love a weekly one-on-one meeting. Not every company we work with is up for that. So I say, hey, you can have a monthly one-on-one meeting, but you can't be going a year without sitting down and having these coaching conversations and development conversations with your people. You need to increase the frequency that you do it. And then you also can look at automating ways to get more feedback from your employees, especially maybe ones that don't want a high level of attention, but you still need to be able to get and understand where they need support. You can automate some of that to make sure your managers are focused on the people that they want to be, need the focus time during their development process. So those are 3 areas that we want to encourage from a frequency standpoint. These will send over here, but again, just talking about skill categories. What are the things for the roles that when you're onboarding, when you're hiring somebody and you're onboarding someone and you're trying to drive them to mastery in their role, what are the key things you're focusing on from a skill development standpoint? And do you have those organized per role in your business? Not just.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I was going to say, not just organized, but visible, so that there's a there's a fair assessment. Everybody goes through the same assessment, right? Everybody gets judged and gets coached upon the same skills within that role. Yeah, behavioral as well. And then again, these are just categories, just to stir thought, and we'll send these out to you. But what are behavioral categories for coaching? So within a sales or in a recruiting, so basically our entire company, I think we've got 150 people now. We have recruiters, but we hire a kind of a sales profile because we want hungry people that are just going after it for our clients. So we represent the company, and they hire us to find passive candidates. So we're looking kind of at a sales profile. And so for our salespeople and our recruiters, we want to say, okay, well, they need to understand, have a strong ability to problem solve, to adapt, right? They need to be confident and poised in stressful situations. What's their score on 1 to 5 there? How innovative are they, thinking outside the box? If they get kind of shut down here, how are they professionally and persistently going about and finding another way in? So that's really important from a behavioral standpoint, and people love that that's a big word, specificity when it comes to their role and how they're getting coached. Let me play this here. Tell me if you guys, hold on a second. I don't know if I'm going to be able to play this. Let me X out of this a second, hold on.
We can skip it, Chris. There you go.
Yeah, well, can you guys see it? Open it back up.
Yeah, I think it's loading.
Oh, the chat has been blowing up. I've not been able to see the chat, so sorry if you've been asking questions. I'm guessing someone's going to log those, and we'll get to those.
I've been answering them quite a bit, but we have a couple.
Oh, good. Okay, so this, I believe it's coming up. Wait for it.
This is our CEO, who's extremely engaging, charismatic CEO. If it works.
One-on-one meetings are just another opportunity.
Oops. Okay. This may not work. If this doesn't work, we're going to move on.
That was working, Chris.
Oh, was it? Okay. Wait for it. Awkward pause. One-on-one meetings. Here it comes. Okay. There we go.
One-on-one meetings are just another opportunity for coaching. And coaching is is a combination of professional growth and development and personal growth and development. We are in a world right now where there's such a mix of whatever's going on in your personal life, it comes into your work life. And so we're actually caring for people. A part of our servant leadership is really caring for the individual. It can't just all be about the company's goals and objectives and how somebody's helping you meet those. There's so much more to the people. So when we talk about the head, the heart, the briefcase, there's their whole life goes into all of that, their behaviors, their values, and their performance. All of that merging together. So how are we pausing to say, how can I help you? What's going in your professional world? What's going on in your personal, private world? Is there anything that it would be helpful for me to know so I can just care for you in this season of time right now? So at Titus, we talk about putting our people first, our partners second, and our profits third. And what that means to our team members is they know that the leaders in our organization have their back. That the assumption when something goes wrong, it's not that they failed. That we will support and strengthen them. And the expectation or the deal is we put you first, you put our partners first. So everybody is making sure that the people that they're directly working with, that's their heartbeat. That's where they're thinking. That's their filtration of how they lead. I want to care for the people. And so our frontline team members will go bend over backwards and run around the whole world for our partners, meaning our customers. And in turn, that brings healthy profits so that we can reinvest in our people and our communities.
So that's just oh, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say something we keep bringing up, even the first slide we covered today were those 8 principles of a people first culture. And what Jonathan's speaking to there is we want to drive a highly performing organization, but it has to be rooted in the right value system, in that people culture and people first culture system. And that's where you can get that perfect blend of a great place to work that's highly performing. It's not just all about performance. It's not just all about having fun. You're getting the right blend for a highly productive work scenario and team scenario. And so you really have to focus on both of them in this process. And I think when you talked to David a couple months ago about speaking here, he was curious to hear, like, how do you do that performance and not have it be a numbers game? It's got to be a top-down leadership element, and how you run your culture and how you take care of your people and how you reinforce the values that are important to the business.
Yeah. Well, let's move into some of the science on what we use. We already mentioned the predictive index, but whatever you guys use, we're big proponents of really equipping your managers to really understand their people so they can coach them, uniquely, right? And so how the science can support that, and Ben, you might jump in on this too, but we believe that the data or the relationships is strengthened by data. It's so much easier. It's so much easier to come to a conversation when you have third-party data validated information saying, wow, this is how you're wired. This is what your strengths are. Here are some, areas of caution. And by the way, here is mine. And that compared to yours, how am I doing as your manager? How am I doing as your leader in these areas? Are we aligned here, right? And when you do this, you can really build processes that really can increase engagement and strengthen that relationship. And then the performance goes up because then you can hold them accountable to not only their performance objectives, but ways in which they're able to achieve based upon how they're wired, okay? This is just an example of that. And those who use the predictive index, this is going to be familiar to you, but we use a personal development chart. So this allows us to understand the person from a kind of a behavioral wiring standpoint. And it's just a chart that understands their strengths and caution areas. And so this becomes part of our coaching guide on our quarterly conversations. And we can even pull this up on a weekly one-on-one if we find that there's some rough edges or some places of underperformance or just lack of engagement. We can pull this up and just have a real honest, reflective conversation. And so that's really maximizing those quarterly conversations is really what tools are you using to do that? Again, we are big proponents of the predictive index. Coaching around this from the head perspective. So, okay, predictive index, again, you guys use the Myers-Briggs or the DISC, there's going to be similar elements to this, but regardless, understanding what the person brings to the table. So within PI, they say that there are 17 different profiles within the human population. And this specific person, Brian Saxa, he's kind of a maverick driver, and here are the things that are going to really connect with him, right? His dominance is off the chart, okay? And so how could you improve your current response when faced with resistance or opposition? Because when he's faced with opposition, he's not patient, naturally. He's not kind, naturally. But his character is such that this is something that he's grown and developed over the years, right? So this becomes a real interesting place for him to really, really dig into, and as the managers to dig into. Ben, I'll let you take this because this digs into a little bit more of
Chris, you want to unshare and I'll just share my screen.
Yes, definitely. Ben, let me talk about this real quick, if I may.
Yep.
And then we'll dig into this. So, okay, part of understanding your people is also recognizing where they come from and what generation sometimes. Again, this is broad brushstrokes, so take this with a grain of salt, but the data shows is that, what generations care about. And the baby boomers, they often will say, we care about job security. They may not say that, but that's what they say, okay, security, where they are, having some sense of stability. So building your coaching around that is really important. So with an empathetic understanding of like, okay, I think they, let me build my coaching, my performance around this value that they may have. If you have a Gen Xer, I'm in the Gen X category. Significance tends to be more of a top priority. They want to feel significant. They want to feel that their contribution matters, and that they can put their fingerprint on something. Okay, millennials, again, big broad brushstrokes, but they really value freedom. They don't tie me down. I want freedom, and this is the generation that grew up with just the ability to be flexible, and job tenure in millennials is even less and less because they care about, hey, I want to build a life of freedom that's built around me. Then Gen Z, they tend to care about the why. Why am I doing this? What's the bigger meaning here? What's the purpose? This is where you get companies that are focused on the triple bottom line, right? That have like a profit or a purpose before profits type of manifesto. And so just recognizing where your people are is going to help you drive those coaching conversations. So, okay. I think I interrupted you, Ben. I know you wanted to get into some of the things and wanted me to unshare my screen so you could share yours. But, oh man, the chat is growing. Okay, Ben, you can share yours for a moment.
All right, so what I'm showing you here is we did this on Excel. We turned this into a software that we started using beginning of this year. And basically what our whole mission was to organize the game plan for each individual person in relation to their role, so their managers can work effectively with them and have it all in a one-stop shop. And so what I'm showing you here is one of our new people in a sales team that is in an entry-level sales role. And we have 3 performance objectives that she has to accomplish on a monthly basis. And you can see that she's struggling, but she's just started with the organization. So our goal is to get her up to mastery, which 100% would mean she's getting everything done that's expected for that. So I work with her, the person that manages her. And so I can talk with that manager here and say, hey, I see where Kaya's performance is at. Now, I want to know, what are you doing on the skill areas? You have Kaya as a lower on her trend on some of the key skill areas that we want to prioritize with her development. And so this manager knows that these are the things when they're doing one-on-one sessions that they're practicing and going over to try to level Kaya up to mastery. And so it puts that really, these is what we onboarded is key onboarding pieces for this position and ongoing coaching pieces. Every individual on our team, we give feedback on values. We want to have a very intentional culture that's rooted in the values that we lay out as an organization. And so we're always driving people towards our key values and bringing those up in conversations. And then we carry over the predictive index pieces. And so we use the behavioral analytics in our hiring because it's 58% predictive on the job success when you combine behavioral and cognitive data. All right, I hired somebody that I thought was hardwired for this role, but am I observing those behavioral traits of them in the actual position? And so now you can talk and have conversations around those key behavioral traits that we believe will give them the best likelihood to hit performance. So one of the things I love about it is for a manager, here are the fundamentals that I need to work with my employee on to give them the greatest likelihood of success, right? The manager and the employee are winning together. You used to work with managers, you work with bad coaches. I coached college football for 10 years. They had random game plans for how they wanted to coach each position group. Well, now we say, no, these are the fundamentals we want to focus on. And let's really coach our person to these things. We might realize over time that we want to change those game plans. We might think there's some different fundamentals that are going to work better for those roles, but now we can see that and we can trend it. And so this is how we do that. So the handout we're going to basically give you is, if you like a simple way of driving a coaching plan, we're going to give you a one pager where you can do that on your own. You look at the objectives and you can look at skills, values, and behaviors and work with the manager, work with yourself to say, what's your plan for you, for this position? Now, at the same time, I can go over and I can see somebody that's super highly performing, right? They're 196% of performance. They're absolutely crushing what we're expected of them. They're still in a development on some of their skills. And really, as I manage people, I realize that not every person will probably be able to be expert in every skill. But again, we talked about reverse engineering success and failure. I need to figure out, if my job as a manager is to help them be successful so we can win together, I get to figure out why they're having success or why they're not. So I can find the root causes to help them improve or get so good at what they're doing that I can encourage them to move up in their career path, right? But I have a playbook that I can look at around the skills, values, and behaviors that I'm trying to assess for that individual person. I'm relating it back to a baseline that we create per position. And the nice thing is, well, we do this with organizations. Each role it can take 5 to 10 minutes, right? Once you figure out how you're kind of thinking about it. But a lot of companies don't take 5 to 10 minutes to really baseline what they want to do for each role, right? Initially, it'd probably take you an hour to really think through it. But as you get good at it, you're going to start to be able to do it quicker, and you can make this a repeatable part of a performance culture, okay? Now, for us, one of the neat things is we do it in the system so we can see how our individual people are doing, but we also can look and we can keep a complete understanding of our entire culture and our performance across our org chart. So we can see where people are in high performing. We know where we might have somebody that's orange and is a little bit underperformance. We know where we have someone that's in red that might be struggling quite a bit. Or we know someone that, hey, they're not getting coached. They're in blue, they're not being coached, right? And we need managers that want to coach their people. And so we need to be able to hold people, our managers, accountable to caring about coaching. And sadly, I think that's one of the hardest things, actually, is to create a culture where your managers really want to develop their people, coach their people, think like a business owner that way. And so we have that so you can track and see it. But this was our mission individually as an organization to do this better for hiring and for managing their people using the same concepts for both. So I will leave it as, go ahead.
We have a question in the chat from Philip. So he says, considering Tony's platinum role, have you ever considered work environment to support treating them the way they need to be treated?
I'll jump into that, and Ben, you can jump in as well. But I'm guessing Tony Alessandra, right? If I remember correctly, he talks about the platinum rule and work environment. And I think he also talks about, behavior. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to answer this from what I remember, but he categorizes people in three or four different basic styles, like a socializer, thinker, relator, something else I don't remember. But yes, so the socializers, right, they're kind of what he would call the party animal. They may need just kind of their environment. You're going to want to make sure that, again, this is a little bit different now that we are all virtual, but making sure that they have places to really get social feedback and really be maybe the person that they can get in that environment, because that's going to matter to them. That's going to engage them. That's going to motivate them. That's also going to help. That's going to make them disengage if they're not in that environment. The director type person, they're going to want to have kind of a leadership opportunity. They're going to have manager responsibilities. They're going to seek that out. They're also not afraid to bend rules. So recognizing that the environment, are there too many rules in their environment, right? We would call the director maybe a maverick in the predictive index sense. The predictive index, the Mavericks love to break rules. That's kind of what they're supposed to do in some ways, right? They need to stay within some boundaries. But work environment, how can you give them maybe a little bit of a longer leash, right? So I don't know. I'm hoping hope that kind of addresses it a little bit. Does that give a sense?
It does. It helps a lot. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask because I see a lot of really great components, and the one thing that keeps coming up because when you brought that up about treating people the way they want to be treated, which I think is so crucial to consider, because treating people as individuals, just like you would any customer. I just found that work environment and considering the individual's work environment based on their work style preferences is a unique way for a coach to provide that level of support. And then as I texted Ben earlier one-on-one that, considering creating a level of engagement that is where the employee and the manager both assume some accountability. So it's not just the manager's responsibility to ensure there's engagement. It's reciprocatory.
I love that.
Hard word to say.
No, we're 100% in agreement. And so I just went into, I didn't plan on showing you guys, but I went into our quarterly reviews. So we can do them quarterly, semi-annual, annual, but we do them quarterly. The first thing in our quarterly review is we pull up their predictive index results and we talk about job alignment and manager fit. And so the first question we ask is, hey, I know you're a collaborator. I know you need opportunities to work with others. You need a supportive work team. You need freedom of expression. And so am I providing you as that manager? Are we providing you the things you need as a collaborator to enjoy your job and to perform in your job? So we actually start that way. One is, to your point, like meeting them where they need from like an environment standpoint, but it's also showing like that empathy. We want our managers to be connecting and showing that they care and are working on those things with their people in the trenches. And so we start all of our reviews with the reverse. Am I serving you to your element? And then we get into working styles, strengths, common traps, and how to work well with others, because we showed you that quadrant of the lone wolves earlier. A lot of lone wolves issues are they lack self or peer awareness. So they're causing team dynamic issues or engagement issues because either they're not self-aware of their own behavioral traits that could cause them issues, or they're not peer aware. Or they're not empathetic at all, where they can understand how to work well with others and understand why the business is making certain decisions, etc. So every quarter we actually pull this up and we walk through that with each employee as a good refresher on both what they need and the team dynamic components in relation to them. Everything else I showed you around skills, values, and behaviors are a relation to their job alignment. We use the PI to get it all relation to themselves from a behavioral understanding, their hardwiring. Are we going over time? I don't know. Are we going a little long?
We are on time, but we've got, we could just open it up for more questions or wrap it up. David?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, you're on time, and if you want to do questions now, I mean, if you're done with what you wanted to do with your slides, go for it.
So just make it a bit more, if you have questions, follow-up stuff, and I'm just going through the chat right here. See, I think, Ben, you've answered some in the chat as well, but
I mean, I know there were several chat questions from earlier.
Yes.
So, and I think Ileana has those, but
Paul wanted you guys to discuss how to give recognition to an overall lower level performer who achieves an individual performance peak without disrupting or concerning an individual who is continuously an overall high performer.
So they're a low performer in the moment, but they've been a high performer in the past. Is that what?
No, they're overall a low level performer, but they've had an individual performance peak, so just that one time, without disrupting or concerning an individual who is continuously an overall higher performer.
So, okay, so it's two different people. One's a low performer, one's a high performer.
Yes.
That might be.
the person who wrote the question could just sort of clarify if there's confusion. So, I mean.
yeah, I can actually
Yeah,
copy and paste it back into the.
This is Paul McEnany, and you have an individual overall, they're a good performer, but they're lower level, and they're not the best performer. And this individual hits a peak in their performance. You've got someone who is consistently a better performer, always a better performer than this person. So you want to give recognition to the person who hit their peak. And and how do you manage the overall higher performer as you're giving that recognition? So,
Well, I think for us, we give recognition multiple ways. So we, standard is one-on-one, manager and employee. So each one of those will get individual recognition, and then we'll do it in team level. So, and we'll give recognition to both on a consistent basis. And then for people that have been really consistent high performers, we're trying to give recognition at the company level as well. And so I would say you can tell we manage performance, but we're a high praise company as well.
A lot of our meetings start with shout outs. And so we'll spend the first 5 or 10 minutes sometimes of a meeting talking about shout outs. And at the team level, we have weekly team meetings where we do company or individual shout outs, personal or not personal, but professional shout outs. And then we gather the entire company once a week on a Friday, and we do personal professional shout outs. So that's one way it lives. So it lives there on the Zoom call. And then it also lives, we have a software that we use. We rifled through a few over the number of years, but right now we have one called Structural. And it's kind of like almost like a Facebook page for our company, where we all get on, we're able to shout people out, and they're able to see it. I get an email when people are shouted out, I look at it and I like it, I comment on it, and people feel valued and recognized for something small, but it's really driven from the manager, and who is like, okay, who among my people need to be shouted out for? What can I praise them for, right? What can I praise them for? Even if they're not hitting their top measure or top marks, what can I praise them for so that there's continued encouragement there? So.
thank you.
I do think one of the number one things we do from a value perspective is we've grown. I was the 8th employee 8 years ago. Now we have 150 almost. We still get everyone together on Fridays for an hour, and we go around the company and we do shout outs on where we see people representing our company values. And it's super positive. So it kind of a refresher, even if you had a bad week, but 2, people know our values. Like we keep coming back to some core fundamentals, and our values are obviously corner pieces of that.
Next question.
Yeah.
Another question, Ileana, or somebody else?
We have one more from Melissa. I think this was earlier in the presentation. So she said, do you also assess practical aspects? For instance, are they given a budget a team authority to make the decisions that need to be made to meet performance objectives?
We don't, Melissa, in terms of like some of those surrounding environments that said, yeah, they were given this, but we didn't get it. But one of the things that I always say when I'm working with companies is sometimes you have the person executing, but you had the wrong strategy. And so as you're assessing if you're winning or not, you need to always be assessing, did we put them in the right play? Right? That's the football analogy, right? We might have a great quarterback, but we keep running plays that don't go anywhere. And that as a business leader, you need to have that awareness to be considering that in all of your development pieces. I think Bridget had a question.
On everything, unmute, turn the video back on. Yeah, I was just, it's really a great conversation you've been having tonight. And I'm just curious as to how Titus kind of, how are you leverage yourselves, or how do people access you? Because I hear, like Chris, I know we talked to the last mixer, like you're that recruitment side of things and making sure there's strong, stickiness for engagement and retention, but then the coaching piece. So I'm just not clear on kind of how Titus is designed and how people or organizations tap into your work.
Yeah, for sure. So on the recruiting side, they come when they have a hiring need, and that can be a one-off hiring need where they get a project manager and recruiter, and we execute that process. We have more and more companies that are actually using what we call a fractional recruiting program with us. So we become their talent wing for a season of life, and we handle the majority of their hiring and screening using our head, heart, and briefcase methodology. And then on the flip side, when you get into the predictive index and the software, as I was showing you, we have a consulting division, and we have consultants in that. So they basically are like success coaches, and they're able to work either with PI or with the software or both to integrate those game plans into how they want to use these methodologies in their business. And really the next step for us on that is, I think that's going to continue to kind of explode, would be to have strategic partnerships with success, like external coaches that maybe have their own clientele, but want to use our concepts and use our tools. And I think we're going to add that to our repertoire in 2022. So like, and that, I think that'll be exciting, because it's not that it's not our relationships. We just want to impact people if they think it's the right strategies and give them the resources to do it.
Any other questions? Jenna?
I was curious, when you're talking about the quadrants earlier, the lone wolf, the contaminators, and then the other champions, how do you identify these, or how do you have the leaders identify the employee in these quadrants? Do you have an assessment that they take?
Actually, let me share my screen again so I can show you how this actually happens. So someone else was asking it. So we talk about an engagement there, but our engagement software is anonymous. So like most engagement surveys, they're anonymous. So we don't know how it applies to the individual person. We might just know like the average engagement of a team. But when we look at, so our managers, we can look at it and we can go, all right, here's this team. We have a group that's in that top right quadrant, and we have one person that's not yet. They're in that development piece. How do we get there? This is representative of their performance score, and in their reviews, how are they doing on that 1 to 5 scale around the skills, values, and behaviors. So we focus on job alignment and performance in here because we're not engagement survey experts, but we use the engagement survey as another kind of broader protocol as we're assessing the health of our team.
Any other questions? That answered it for you, Jenna? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, now we come to the next exciting part. Oh, Ileana has a question.
Oh, well, Philip has a question. He
Oh, Philip
asked
has a question.
if you can see where the manager is.
So the manager would fall on whatever team they're at. So like they'd be on their boss's 4-quadrant block. And they have different skills, values, and different skills and behaviors for the management role. The values are the same for everyone in the company. And so that's where you can see their job alignment. But for their performance metrics, like we have clients that say performance metric would be, you have 5 direct employees, you have 5 one-on-one meetings per month. Are you executing your coaching sessions with your people? So that's a process goal, but that's how they want to assess, are they having coaching sessions? And so as you design your role, you got to think about basically those top 5 things you want that manager to be thinking about the most. One of ours is actually that their team engagement score. So we don't know the individual levels on engagement surveys, but we can see a team score. So we put the team score as one of their performance objectives.
Okay, that's what I was thinking about. I was wondering if you could look at engagement of each individual, find out where they are on that, and then it's always nice to know where the manager is on that as well, and kind of.
You know what, and Philip, the reason I like data and it always produces good thought processes is we have a really crazy high engagement score as an organization. It's like 98%. It's like kind of silly, but then we see someone that's at like 95, and we're like, ooh, what's wrong with that team? Right? They're not at 98. But what's funny is our highest performing teams, so on that performance and engagement spectrum, the leaders that have a slightly lower engagement score from their team also have a slightly higher performance scores for their team. And so, right, it's like, again, like talk to me in 3 years. I'm going to have so much historical data on so many companies on what that really looks like over time. But is there like a certain point of diminishing returns on engagement? But is that maybe that manager does a better job of holding people accountable? They're maybe not quite as liked in some capacities, but they get more out of their people, right? So it'll be interesting to see that. The other thing that I'm really excited about too, like big picture, is like we might work with 20 architecture firms. We'll know how architecture firms build out their roles, what they use for coaching plans, what they say are the key performance things they want to track. And we'll be able to start creating best practices across subsets. And we'll be able to say like, hey, this company's performance data, they're 120% of performance compared to this other company that's 92. And let's look at the difference in their coaching plans. And so it's going to take us a few years to get to data that actually matters, but I'm excited to see where that goes.
Yeah.
Okay, Jenny, you have a question?
Yeah, I just have one more. What are some tips that you guys would have for overcoming resistance to implementing this people first and performance first hand-in-hand culture?
No, I think that's really important because I work with managers and it's change management. So anytime you're going to roll out, performance and coaching, do not underestimate that it's really a change management endeavor that you're really doing across the group. And so you have to get the buy-in from the top to the middle and into the bottom. And your managers have to be on board with, it's important to coach their people. It's also important for their own growth that they have clarity and plans for themselves to be successful. And so you have to spend time going through the presentation with each level. And then one thing I didn't show you, but is also important, you have to give your lowest level employees then opportunities to give feedback back up the chain. So one feature that I didn't show you, but they can give feedback on certain topics back up to people on work environment, on communication style, communication, and finding ways that we're gonna have this great culture of performance and people first, but we're also gonna give you a greater voice.
One thing too, Jenna, that John Cotter, his famous HBR article, he's written books about engaging and performing and change management. We kind of reverse engineer that. And so one of the things we do whenever we're introducing something new is creating a sense of urgency around it on why it matters. And so that's why I started with, hey, performance and profitability, because a lot of CEOs, they don't tend to really care enough about engagement data or retention data until they recognize that there's a direct correlation to profitability and performance of their company. So we start there and create a sense of urgency within, you know, the hiring manager or the leadership, the executive team. And then the kind of secondly would be then a pilot study, or what Cotter would say is a guiding coalition, right? And so just a few people, like Ben was talking about, getting buy-in. It may not be a company-wide, but to say, hey, let's get buy-in here and let's do a case study and let's prove why this actually drives performance and engagement and why this actually matters. And then we cast a big vision for it. And so always going back to the why, right? And so those kind of things, cascading communication, all that stuff has just been really, really key to get buy-in on it. So stuff that you guys already know, but just, communicating and making sure that there's that guiding coalition that can buy into it first.
Another thing that's
Just, I need you to finish because we're at time. So,
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Keep talking.
I realize we could go farther, but I know we're at time and I don't want to hold people past when we committed to doing that. Jenna, I'm assuming that you know how to contact these guys, and the rest of you know how to contact them, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to have further conversations. Now, you're going to be getting an evaluation soon after this finishes, so please complete it. And I want to thank you very much for your participation and your engagement. And come to the mixer next week and we can talk some more, okay? So thank you very much to everybody.
Yeah.
everybody. Nice
Thanks,
meeting you.
Chris. Thanks, man.
Yeah, great to see you.